UFC 270 is almost here. There have been some changes to the card throughout the week, things added to the slate, questions that have been answered. You can call me Kunith, let's make some money this week. If you haven't already, go back and watch the first look video from earlier in the week. That's where we talk about the slate fighter by fighter, salary by salary, and we talk about spots that we like and spots that we don't like. And that's more of a full card breakdown. For this final picks video, we're going to be looking at what we could do with salary this week. We're going to build some lineups not only for tournaments, but for cash games as well. And ultimately, we're just going to talk about what we need to do to be successful this week. For those of you that watch week in and week out, thank you so much for the support. I really appreciate it. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, we're trying to hit 100 subscribers by fight time. And if you watch the channel and you don't subscribe, send location. Now off the bat, there are a few things that stood out to me this week. First, you'll notice that a lot of these favorites, they're getting juiced up. Money continues to come in on some of these big favorites, and some of them are in fights that are closer than the lines are indicating. So don't be surprised if you see one or two of these big favorites lose this week. Something else that stands out to me this week is I believe that the title fights are going to go way over owned. Most of the lineups you'll be competing against are going to have one fighter from each of the title fights because of the way that the champions and challengers are priced. A good way to get different would be limiting yourself to one fighter. I know most of you making your lineups are probably going to be plugging in Francis Ngannou and Brandon Moreno, and that's for good reason, but keep in mind, MMA DFS is all about getting different. So if you can limit yourself to one of these guys, let's say you just wanted to play Francis Ngannou because the price just makes so much sense, but you don't play Brandon Moreno, you're immediately getting different, not only in competitions that are big, but also some of these smaller field, maybe single entry competition. You'll also notice that we have 8 UFC debutantes this week. Normally we have 1 to 2, maybe 3 per card, but having 8, that's unusual. That's very high, and normally we're looking to fade people that are making their UFC debut because of those jitters, right? You're fighting on the biggest stage for the first time. It'd be very nerve-wracking and you might not give your best performance, but with 8 of them on this card, I think we need to put that kind of thinking on the back burner, because if not, we might get in trouble cutting ourselves off of too much of that pool. Now, there have been some fights added to this slate since our first look video. We've got Elia Taporia, he's fighting Charles Jourdain. Elia Taporia coming back at 9,400. He's expensive, but I think we need to make it work. He's already much better than Charles Jourdain everywhere, but specifically in the grappling department. So the clearest path to victory for Taporia is going to be to take Jourdain down, finish the fight with ground and pound, maybe even a submission. He might even be a sneaky play too, considering that he's not the biggest name. He's the most expensive fighter on the slate. The fight was added to the slate later than when salaries were initially released. And Charles Jourdain, people's most recent memory of it is when he beat the brakes off of Andre Ewell. So I think that people might take a shot at Jourdain at 6,800, and I don't think the ownership on Taporia is going to be all that high this week. Jack Della Madeleine, he's fighting Pete Rodriguez. Now both of these guys are making their UFC debut. I expect this fight to be over within the first round one way or another. Now you'll hear a lot of people out there going with Jack Della Madeleine. He's the obvious pick. That's the consensus right now. But it's very hard for me to tell you why. Yes, Madeleine is a big favorite. Yes, he's the more experienced fighter, but he hasn't fought the highest level of competition. And the same could be said for Pete Rodriguez. But fights that he's had, he's looked great. He's had 4 fights, 4 knockouts, all inside of the first half of the first round. So the power is undeniable. And I think that's what we're going to see on Saturday night against Jack Della Madeleine. And one thing that stands out to me is just the price, because again, 8 fighters making their debut this week. When you look at the pricing on Draftkings, you notice that the other fighters, so I'm going to go over, we've got Victor Henry, Pete Rodriguez, Andre Fiallo, Simon Oliveira, Jasmine Jasdovikas, Gerardo Valdez. 6 out of the 8 are priced below 7,600. Outside of that, you've got Michael Morales at 8,200 getting some respect. And then you have Jack Della Madeleine all the way up here. This is elite pricing for someone who we know little about against someone in Rodriguez who throws bombs. At 7,000, Pete Rodriguez looks like a better play, in my opinion. If you're targeting this fight, I think targeting this side makes a ton of sense. Now, if we take a look at some value options at 8,000 and below, you've got Trevin Giles. Now, he's a veteran, right? He's making his debut at 170, where he should match up physically pretty well. And he's fighting Michael Morales, who's making his UFC debut. He's undefeated, but He's also rather untested, and I personally don't think that this is a great spot for him. And take it from me, I'm not a big Trevin Giles guy. I don't know who is a big Trevin Giles guy, but I'm not one of them. But I have been watching MMA long enough to know that times like this come around every so often, where you have somebody who's young, a little sprinkle of hype coming in, normally doesn't have any losses or very few, and then they fight some old veteran who teaches them a lesson. And Trevin Giles could possibly be coming into this fight in the best shape of his life. And not like the fake interview, this is the best shape of my life, every fighter says during their camps. I'm saying like actual best shape of his life. So Trevin Giles, boxing heavy style, he might be able to box the kid up. And if he comes out with say a third round finish because Morales gasses out, then he's going to score you a decent amount of points. And at 8,000, it looks like a really solid play. Francis Ngannou, it's a good day when you're able to pay $7,800 for Francis Ngannou. Like we talked about in the first look, I do expect him to get it done this week. The power, the speed, the durability, they all are what sell me on the Predator this week, and at $7,800 he looks fantastic. I think he's going to win, and he's going to score over 100 points because he's going to get the knockout. He might get a knockdown in this spot. Francis Ngannou is the man this week at $7,800, definitely in my lineups. Cody Stamann at $7,600. We talked about in the first look how he had to put a little respect on his name at this price point. I mean, if you're targeting this fight, you probably should be playing Cody Stamann. Just because Saeed Nurmagomedov's probably not going to finish him in this spot, Cody Stamann's got the chin. He's probably going to be physically the bigger man in there, not the taller man, but maybe the bigger man in there. And he shoots for his takedowns and he gets them. He's a strong wrestler. So Cody Stamann's not a terrible look this week. I think he's one of the safer options down at this price point, $7,600, but he might not score you a ton of points. That's the problem. Gerardo Valdez looks live for a first round finish in this fight. I'm very low on Matt Frevola this week. I think even if their prices were swapped, if Valdez was $8,700, Frevola was $7,500, I'd still be telling you to pick Valdez. That's how confident I am in a knockout in this spot, just based on what we've seen lately from Matt Frevola. I just can't trust that guy, and I think somebody like Valdez, who's known for throwing bombs, I think he's the play this week at $7,500. Simon Oliveira at $7,300 doesn't look terrible, right? If he wins, we know that he's going to score a ton of points because he's going to get a submission probably in the first or second round. And we know that Tony Gravely is always looking to secure these takedowns, right? He's securing takedown after takedown, and for a jiu-jitsu artist who likes his front chokes, he likes his guillotines, that might play to Simon Oliveira's advantage. So at $7,300, if he wins, again, I'm expecting a high score. But I do think you have to show respect to the other side of this. The deeper that I look, I like Tony Gravely to win, but Simon Oliveira at $7,300, not a bad play if you want to take a shot down here and you need the relief. Pete Rodriguez at $7,000. Again, I just think he's worth looking into. If you target this fight, I would suggest taking this side for the salary relief and the upside. You don't absolutely need to get here, but I don't think it's the worst idea in the world, to be honest with you. How to get different in tournaments this week? First things first, I'm going to take a stance on this. I don't think you should play Cyril Gane, even if you think he's going to win the fight. The reason why I say that is because I expect him to come in at high ownership, 40 to 60% ownership in most of your contests. And even if he wins every minute of this fight, I don't expect him to finish Ngannou, and he's probably not going to be securing a ton of takedowns because that's going to require him to close the distance. And with Ngannou's power, distance is Gane's best friend. I expect this card to have a decent amount of finishes. And by fading Gane, you're not only getting different, but you're creating an opportunity to search for finishes elsewhere. And I love me some Cyril Gane. I'm not hating on Cyril Gane. I'm just saying that's what I think based on what I see. One way to get super different on this card is by targeting either the Vanessa Demopoulos fight or the Kay Hansen fight. I do expect Kay Hansen to get the job done in this spot. Might secure some takedowns, some control time. If she scores something like this, it might not be enough to win, but if she scores something like 100 points, let's say she completely dominates and no one sees it coming, well, yeah, then she's going to show up on the optimal lineup coming in at 9% ownership. Vanessa Demopoulos, I expect her to actually carry a decent amount of ownership relative to somebody like Kay Hansen. I don't think she's coming in at 30, 40%. but an 18% Vanessa Demopoulos in your contest, I wouldn't be shocked. But I do expect her to get the W in this spot. I do think that she's going to secure some takedowns as well. And I will go over a quick cash game strategy for you. I think there's a formula this week. It's real simple. For starters, we stack the co-main event. We're not stacking the main event just because if Ganou wins, it's probably early, it's probably fast. But if Ganou wins, it's probably a decision where he outpoints Francis, takes a very patient approach. I could totally see that happening. So I wouldn't recommend trying to stack the main event when you're playing cash, but the co-main event, this is perfect for stacking for cash. You've got Moreno and Figueiredo going at it for the third time. I expect it to be a 25-minute war. I do expect Brandon Moreno to get it done. I could also see him finishing the fight maybe later, maybe rounds 4, rounds 5. I just know once he starts this, it's over. It's over. Once he starts doing that little Brandon Moreno thing that he does, it's over. It's a wrap. He's comfortable at that point. But back to the strategy. We're going to stack the co-main event. We're going to add somebody that's low price. They could be anybody. They could be, I really don't care. It could be anybody down here. Let's say you take Pete Rodriguez, let's just say. Then we start looking at heavy grappling advantages or grapple heavy game plans. So we start looking at Adolfo Vieira, Tony Gravely. Still have 8,900. You could grab Kay Hansen if you wanted to. And if you didn't want to do that, obviously you can come down here, grab somebody like Vanessa Demopoulos. But now you've got a situation where you've got grappling advantage, grappling advantage, grappling advantage. You get a winner from this fight, and you just hope that Pete Rodriguez scores something. You're not that confident on Pete Rodriguez. This is why I say that you can play anybody down here for cash this week, because now you've got this whole range to work with. You want Gerardo Valdez, you can do it. You want the takedowns of Cody Stamann, you can do it. There are a lot of things that you can do, but this is the route that I would recommend. Try to go get these grapple heavy game plans. Try to grab somebody in the mid-range like Vanessa Demopoulos or Trevin Giles. So let's do the same thing. If we take Vanessa Demopoulos out, we plug Trevin Giles in, we have 7,900 to work with. You could go with the big Fran if you wanted to. You can sweeten the pot a little bit if you go up to Elia Taporia, because you can still come down here and grab somebody like Simon Oliveira, or you can go back to that Pete Rodriguez. But I think that's the move this week. Stack the co-main event, grab somebody in that mid-range, and then you can go get the more premium options. Now for tournaments, I think this is chalk tournament lineup right here. Brandon Moreno, Francis Ngannou, Adolfo Vieira. These are probably going to be the 3 most highly owned fighters on the card. Michael Morales or Trevin Giles. I think Trevin Giles is getting his respect publicly. So either one of these guys. Let's say it's Michael Morales in this situation. You go down here to Gerardo Valdez, who people are going to be looking at for that knockout upside. Now you've got 9,000 to work with. Tony Gravely. That's chalk. That's what you're going to see in your contests up and down. Now, does that look like a terrible lineup? No, right? Even if you wanted to swap him out for Vanessa Demopoulos, I think that makes for even a better lineup. But this is chalky. So if you want to get different in your contest, like we said, maybe we limit ourselves to just one of the fighters fighting in the 5-round fights. I'm looking at Elia Taporia. I think the upside is too hard to get away from. I'm looking at Gerardo Valdez for that KO upside. Like Trevin Giles for that balance. Really don't want to be the guy who doesn't play Adolfo Vieira when he scores 100 points. Now I have 8,300 to work with, so I can grab somebody like Demopoulos. So if we were just looking at this, you don't have Brandon Moreno or Davison Figueiredo or Cyril Gane. So you're already way different. You're targeting one of the women's MMA fights with Vanessa Demopoulos. I'm not certain whether or not Trevin Giles or Michael Morales will come in at higher or lower ownership. I'm not certain who's going to be more owned. I would assume it's Michael Morales, but I know that Trevin Giles is getting his respect out there. But let's say it is Trevin Giles. Let's say everybody is excited to play Michael Morales. So you plug in Trevin Giles at 8,000, and then you've got nothing but upside with Vieira, Valdez, Taporia. So that is a way that you can get different this week if you're playing in some of these larger field contests or really just any kind of GPPs. Those are my final picks. That's what I think we need to do this week to be successful. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, like the video, subscribe to the channel. That way I can bring more of this to you.